And we're live! It's become my thing in broadcasts I'm on is to just like throw my hands up in the air and be like, and we're live! I don't know. I think it's
I
fun.
think it's fun.
A la like Frankenstein.
Exactly. Exactly.
I'd like to admire the cover of the book while we're getting things started. Just look at how pretty it is.
Isn't it fantastic?
It's so pretty. It's the prettiest.
My hardcover is a little beat up. I don't think you can tell, but it's got like those like pages that are different lengths. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so does the
Oh, that's fun.
I kind of hate that, honestly. Like, I don't like that. I love this aesthetic so much. Hi, Marion. But I don't like that.
Yeah, it's, I mean, I'm sure it's to give it the feel of a journal, but
I was thinking it was to give it a feel of like an old-timey book. Like something written before we had like standardized pages that we could very crisply cut.
I know how bookbinders work, and they can cut them to size. Darn it! Like I was honestly thinking about that. As like, I know people with bookbinder like materials. I could take this book to them and say, "Please, even it up here." Driving me a little batty.
Can you just trim off these unclean ends right here?
Yeah, just stick it in the book press and just slice it. Yeah. Just makes turning the pages so difficult.
I did find that it made turning the pages a smidge more difficult, unless you were on one of the
going
downward
uphill,
slopes. Yeah.
Uphill or downhill, or whichever hill is the correct.
Going to longer. That's, yeah. No cats in drawers. No. Absolutely not. Madam, I'm going to ask you to come away from there. Yes, you. No cats in drawers. Let's go. She's so offended by the notion that I would scoot her away from the drawers that she was very clearly thinking of climbing into.
Poor cat. My cat has decided to take to burrowing into the closet now. I have a bin of sweaters, and she'll go and like nose the sweaters and then just kind of like move them aside and like create a little hole and then snuggle up in there and curl up into a little ball. And then I'll go open it, and like half of my sweaters will be tumbling out onto the floor from where she's like lodged herself. And then you can be like, "Hey, what are you doing?" And she'll like come out and be all like sleepy and bleary and like all warm from like nesting in my sweaters. I'm like, "What are you doing? Why are you so cute?" Ah!
Oh my god. That sounds delightful.
She's very good. She's a very good cat. Mm-hmm.
That does sound like a recipe for having very furry sweaters, though.
Yeah. It's not exactly sweater weather right now, but I anticipate when I dig back into that drawer, the sweaters will be fuzzier than I remember them being. And probably a different color.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
Oh.
So I know we've got a couple of folks who aren't going to be able to join us tonight, one of whom is DMing a game, and another of whom ordered the book but then shipped it to the wrong house.
Oh no.
That's
and
very sad.
Didn't want spoilers on this one, which I'm gonna own up to my own tragedy, as I usually do. that much book. That's all I had left. That much.
Mm.
Just didn't quite make it. I did find that reading on my lunch break gave me a lot more like relaxing of a lunch break. Like it's very soothing lunch break.
Yeah. It's nice not to look at a screen during your lunch break, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I've been reading in the evenings now instead of watching Netflix so much. And for like maybe the past 2 weeks or so, because I actually finished this maybe 2 weeks ago, and then I've read 2 books since then, but I've just been reading in the evenings. It's been so nice. It's just so nice. I'm like, I actually feel like going to bed now and not like turning into a weird zombie that staggers to bed after like slamming my laptop shut after just like accidentally watching too many episodes of something. So books, they're why we're here.
It's so true. It's so true.
Josh, I bet you would have been able to finish the book if you hadn't spent all that extra time trying to turn the pages.
It's possible. It's possible. I don't know. The problem I actually ran into is that on multiple occasions, I picked the book up and was reading and then got interrupted by something like 2/3 of the way to doing a turn, like turning the page. And then I'd have to come back and be like, wait, where was I? Oh God, where was I? Like, I found it much harder to just like pick the book back up and look at exactly where I was reading before. And I think that's because I was getting so like immersed in what was going on that I was just like, I have no idea how much page is left because I have no idea where I was looking when all of these things were happening.
This one did feel like it had a lot going on.
Yeah.
Trying to chat with Lauren before we went live on stream, she was like, and then this was happening, right? And I was like, well, I can like remember where we like end up at the end of the book, and I can remember like some certain like big turning points through the book, but if you ask me to like draw a timeline of events that go from here to here to here to here, I'm up, I think.
Yeah, I think part of it is that we're like trading chapters between the present with January and then the past, you know, like notebook that her father left. And so it's kind of like things get a little jumbled, I think, because of that like timeline mixing.
Mm-hmm. What?
Go
sorry.
ahead, Cheryn. Go ahead, Cheryn. Sorry.
I was gonna ask if you guys had a point, or if it was just sort of obvious the whole time, figuring out who Adelaide and Yule Ian were to January, like being her parents.
So I originally read it like 1.5 years ago, so I don't quite remember, but I feel like I picked up pretty fast that it was her father. I don't know. I feel like he is like dark-skinned with tattoos, and Adelaide meets a mysterious man who's dark-skinned with tattoos. Or maybe he didn't have tattoos then, but like, I don't know. I wasn't all that surprised. And then definitely when I think they meet again and she says the name Julian, and I was like, okay.
Yeah, I remember thinking early on, like she says something about the fact that she's not a scholar, And I was like, yeah, but your last name is like Scholar, which is like real close. That's kind of weird. And then I remember, and I don't know exactly what it was that's happening. I'll probably try and look it up while we're like streaming because I really want to know. But I was like, I bet they're her parents. When like at the scene where she was like dragged into the doctor's office at the like sanitarium thing, the whatever institution that she was stuck in, and I don't know what it was. It was like, I bet this is, and then it was, and I was like, yay! I feel smart.
For me, it was page 135, and I mostly remember this because it was like 4 days ago, and I posted it in chat. I was like, the line was, but we need not concern ourselves with all those 10,000 worlds here. We are interested only in the world that Adelaide Larson sailed into in 1893. It is not, perhaps, the most fantastical or beautiful of all possible worlds, but it is the one I long to see above every other. It is the world I have spent nearly 2 decades searching for. I was like, so this is her father writing the book to her, and also Adelaide is her mother, right? Like, is that? It seems like exactly where we're going. And then at the point that he's talking about his own history, he's like, let's talk about this little boy. His name is Yule Ian, and I'm like, Julian. His name is Julian, like her father. Yeah. I see you, book. I see you. Watching you.
Did you like the narration style? Like the sort of like intimate, like almost diary style voice that the book had?
I personally not only really liked the narration style, I really enjoyed the difference in narration styles. Where when you're hearing like Adelaide's tales recounted and Julian is recording them as like faithfully as he can, how it's very much like, I don't know, like folk tale style, which is how Adelaide would have presented her story. Anything you're reading that is pretty clearly written by January has this kind of like Mark Twain-ish kind of vibe to it, where it's a little fantastical, but also seems very mundane. But then like the thing that always struck me was how both Julian and January write about smell and metaphor like so much.
Yeah.
The very distinctive smells of things, and then comparing those smells to other things, like, God, I loved it. And then, of course, Julian writing in a very scholarly style.
I really felt it gave him a lot of personality and voice in a way that, like, I don't know. I feel like it told me just as much about Julian as like the stories of him, like, you know, falling in love and becoming a scholar. It's like one was like showing, and then like, but the voice was, or one was telling and the other was showing. Like you really felt like he wrote like a scholar. And I love the footnotes, of course. You know, the book club loves their footnotes, so.
At least this one does.
Yeah.
I also really appreciated every time January would quote something as if it were a museum placard. Like there's one late in the book where she's talking about finding 4 potatoes so wizened that she half imagined seeing them in Mr. Locke's collection. Like withered ears, 4 count, likely inedible.
Yeah. The I have lots of thoughts on the like objects and the commentary on like collecting and owning cultural heritage and like the making other cultures into consumable objects to put on a shelf. I just thought that was really interesting commentary. And I used to work in museums, and so I have lots of thoughts about all of that. But yeah. I also thought when it comes to like the style and voice of the writing, I thought the commentary on capitalizing and the two, I remember it was like the two like little pieces of the H that make home look like chimneys, and it was very, very strange in a way that I liked. It definitely drew your attention to the fact that you're like interacting with like text, like a written word, which I mean is clearly intentional with the importance of writing in the story. But I haven't seen that many other books do that unless they include bits of like handwriting elements in the book or something. So I thought that was neat.
I feel like I just have a bunch of like little random observations of things that I thought were interesting. Like Adelaide, I think she's from like right outside of a town called Ninley. And then Julian is from the city of Nin. And they're just 3 letters apart. And, you know, I thought that was a choice.
I didn't pick up on that, but I'm sure it was intentional.
Yeah.
With that, like,
it's like
eating of knowledge. Yeah.
Like the door, like that's where the doors are thin. So like there's some kind of sort of language carryover where worlds bleed into each other and change happens, which that was a theme that I really liked very much.
Yeah.
You need doors for change, for progress, for yeah.
Yeah, what did you think of like the world building and the magic system and you know the concept of like doorways and portals and going through other like did you like it? Do you think it was overdone or clever or what?
I liked that there was all of that room for different types of magic systems, like based on the world, like, and interesting that like January's powers from her technical home world like worked, and I guess everybody's powers from their home worlds all worked in like the world that the book opens in. Which, like, I guess, which is Adelaide's world, because nobody else is actually from that world that, like, interacts with them in there, except Samuel.
Jane is from our world, too.
Oh, yeah. Jane is from, yeah, that's right. She just hung out in the other world so long and was like, I don't want to.
Yeah. I think books about the importance of stories can be a little trite sometimes. Sometimes it just feels like, you know, books are so important. People who are into books are better than everyone else. Like sometimes it can feel a little like self-aggrandizing, but I think this one came off as charming. I don't know. I dug the portal stuff, particularly because it like kind of critically engages with the concept of the trope rather than just using the trope itself. Like, I mean, any number of ones like let's see if we can name some. Outlander, Portal Through Time, Alice in Wonderland is mentioned a bunch. Narnia, which isn't mentioned in this because it's written in like the 40s or 50s, but I mean Narnia is like the OG like number one.
I think Wizard of Oz gets mentioned, doesn't it?
Oh, did the Wizard of Oz get mentioned in this one?
I think so.
Yeah, it would have been written by
Yeah.
them, I think. Yeah. Right?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing I really appreciated was how the different portals explained different mythology.
Mhm.
Like you have a Greek portal which leads you to Dante's Inferno. You've got a East African portal which leads you to Amazonian tribeswomen. You've got like there's all these like really cool location specific myths that are then tied to the portals in those regions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's a kind of a fun like universalizing like theory. And I liked that it wasn't too America centric. Like they mention portals from all over the world, but it also doesn't completely ignore the existence of the US, which is, you know, enormous. Like I feel like often these like portal things, it's like, oh, it's in England where everything is set. Or it just takes place in, you know, the US. I thought there was a really interesting mix of the two.
Yeah, one of the books that I read like right after I finished this one is Every Heart a Doorway, which I borrowed from Lauren. And it's, you know, like about like kids who have gone on like portal fantasy style adventures and are then in like a boarding school. And so like reading those two very sincere sort of like the different ways that like portals and doorways are treated, like you had to really like hunt for them in both of the books, but sort of in different ways. Like it felt like it was more of a personal calling in the other book, whereas this one is more like place based, I guess, like where they've said like the veil was thin between the two worlds already, and then it's got all of that like cross-cultural exchange in those areas that they may or may not actually even be aware of.
Yeah. Both books have like this element of traveling through a portal, like changing you. Like both Adelaide and Julian are just like irrevocably, that makes it sound bad. They're deeply changed by their experience with the portal, and so is January with that first one. It like sparks like this desire for adventure, this like drive, and like a different perspective. And I thought that was really interesting. And like in the other book, also the children who come back out of the portals are like never the same. They see our current world through like a totally different lens and perspective, which I think makes sense and is definitely like a trope of like portal style fantasies. Like rarely do the kids go back to being normal, and it's normally kids, which I think is interesting.
That's what makes them so like, oh god, rough.
Yeah, I definitely think there's like metaphors for like growing up in these, and, like childlike wonder and stuff like that.
Like I also feel like there was a bit of a metaphor for you know, growing up and putting aside like whimsy and magic and things like that, and how kind of dry that makes the world, and how like that kind of sucks the adventure out of it. And so that's, you know, like the whole point of the society is like we want to close all these doors because we're gonna collect all these magic artifacts so that we are more powerful and we are more wealthy, and then we don't want any chaos. No chaos here, thanks. I don't know, get all this magic out of here.
Yeah, actually, in my note, I have civilizing, comma, imperialism, comma, order, comma, and growing up. Because I feel like they're sort of drawing these like, I feel like the author's kind of drawing these like this like web with the goals of the society to like dominate and civilize and impose order, and that sort of is in direct conflict with both sort of January as she grows up being like willful and independent and outspoken, and then also with like the magic and chaos and creativity of the doors. And I really liked that. As like a sort of a coming of age story, I think it worked really well. And like the whole like order versus magic, especially like modernity is mentioned several times, and it's in this like really interesting like early 1900s time period where, I mean, I certainly feel like, I don't know, the perspective is that the world got a little less magical, as the modern world took hold, factories and electric lights and cars and all that. So it's very interesting.
I think there's something to be said for a lot of the convenience and a lot of the like timekeeping and strictly scheduled and all of like, these are all things that take a little bit of whimsy out of the world just by nature. And this is kind of highlighting those things as destroying doorways to other worlds. But I think the more literal interpretation, I think, would be something more along the lines of when you are on a strict schedule, when you are, okay, I've got to work my 8 or 10 or whatever hours, and then I go home and I've got to clean, and then I've got to cook, and I've got to take care of household stuff, and then I've hardly got time for myself. When do you have time to explore those little fringe spaces that are, even those are dwindling on the outskirts of society, where there's a place in the woods where there's a tree and there's kind of a wooden archway, and the kind of the magic of nature and the magic of just being and things like that. Like, when do you find time to explore those things when you're on this like very strict regiment?
Yeah, definitely.
I thought this was a very good point to make. Thank you, Lost Limey. And I think that comes up really early in the book, is like, in fact, I think it's one of the first lines is every story contains some sort of doorway. Maybe it's to the same world, but it'll feel like a different world once the hero passes through. Like Lord of the Rings, you've got Bilbo going on the adventure and committing to it and leaving home for the first time, but you've also got Frodo doing the same thing. Like, there's even staying inside the same world, there's a sort of like a commitment to things are going to change, and now I'm leaving for that change.
Yeah. Just like making a decision that you can't take back, Yeah. That alters the world or like your interactions with it for sure. I mean, what comes to mind is like, the die is cast, like crossing the Rubicon. And once you do that, once you cross that threshold, it changes things forever. Very cool.
Out of the Shire. We're not in Kansas anymore. Yeah.
I wonder if you could consider Peter Pan a bit of a portal fantasy, because they definitely travel to another world, and there's definitely those like elements of like childhood and whimsy and like
I would say
change.
yes. I would say definitely. Neverland definitely counts. Yeah.
I mean, there's magic there, like
Yeah.
fairy dust and all.
I'm just going to be thinking of all of the different books and like what might have counted as a portal, as a doorway.
I really like those artist maps that have a lot of different fantasy worlds like blended together, sort of as if they were this like continent or world that all sort of blends together and is connected in some way. I have a couple of those maps, and they're good.
I have not seen any of those.
I'll maybe see if I can pull one out while we're on the stream, because they're great and they make me happy. You talking about Neverland reminded me that there's a Neverland one in there too. Yeah, and speaking of like the doorways as like borders and like change and that kind of thing, I was just like, is this book is about immigration and no borders, and like people should be able to move where they want. And so there was that aspect of it too that I was getting.
That's really interesting. That hadn't occurred to me at all. But like the creative exchange of ideas, totally.
Yeah, that was the one that was like that I kept coming back to again. But that's partially due to like work experience and things too. Like so, like like borders as just constructs that people have made over the course of time to say like, no, we do things this way here and you do things that way there, and no meeting.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. That's really interesting.
I hadn't really considered that either, but it does kind of fit in line with a lot of what our villains wanted, which was for things to be very segmented and things to be very controlled.
Yeah, I think that's part of why I read that so heavily. It was like, it's got like this imperialist sort of patriarchal old white dudes from somewhere, I guess not exactly that world, but like controlling the movement of these other characters who don't look like them and aren't from the same place. And the part where January was in the institution, like that part was rough to read.
Yeah.
Like that was just like, I was having a hard time. I was like, this is bad. This is not good.
Yeah. Like the wealthy people in power wanting to, close all of these doorways that let people and ideas through, while at the same time collecting all of the like cultural artifacts for their like ownership and display and consumption, I think is like, yeah, that's really interesting. And not to mention like all of the attention paid to like race and how January's race like defines how she interacts and like navigates the world. It was very, I really appreciated, I think, how the author approached it. And like, it felt like she never wanted the reader to forget, like, that it is something that January has to, or that like affects just all the time. Like even in the asylum where they Locke had to, pay extra and pull strings for her to stay there because it was like a white only space. And then also, Jane couldn't visit, and like all of these like things I thought was really interesting. And of course, like the tie to being like in between and not fitting in and all of those things. Cool. I'm going to be thinking about that immigration thing for a while, Cheryn.
It adds to the richness of the world.
No, I love it. It's so interesting. I'm going to have to put the pieces together. I'm like my favorite meme, like Charlie from Always Sunny with like the board. You know what I mean?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And I'm putting the pieces together.
I'm going to get that map.
I was, speaking of kind of exploring the racial equality side of the story, I found it very interesting that you get kind of that, if she's traveling with a wealthy white man, all of a sudden she's like, oh, well, she's very unique and very precious, and, like, she's not quite like us, but that's okay. But the instant she ends up on her own, all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, I don't know what this little girl on these back roads is doing, but I don't trust her. And it's like, well, that does sound like America in the early 1900s. Yes, it does.
Yeah. Yeah, I think she mentions that like all of that safety and privilege and wealth was very much borrowed and only given on, I just read this, and it was like, it was conditional on her good behavior and cooperation, and like at any moment it could be taken away. It wasn't like inherent like to her, which
Exactly.
yeah
That
her
whole
relationship Go ahead.
Oh, I was to say that whole part just, and then with the institution part, it's just like this feels very trapping, and I don't like it. I don't like it. I want to get to another part of the book where we are less trapped.
Yeah, her relationship with Locke was really interesting. I think it was like, I think more nuanced than I would have expected from a young adult book, where normally the big baddie is bad and kind of like mwahaha, but like you do get like the feeling that Locke cares for her, but not in like a human way, and like she cares for him, and like it's, I don't know, it's complicated. Like he's still unequivocally the baddie, but it feels like real and painful in some ways, in which it wouldn't if he was just like a mean old man who didn't give her dinner and sent her to an asylum and, mistreated her.
Yeah, it felt very much like he had an ownership of an object type relationship to her, where he like cared about the thing that he owned, but not about her as a person. And I was also kind of surprised by like the complexity of how her feelings towards him were explained. How she like was really torn a lot of times between just like wanting to go back to the safety of Lock House because it would be easier, and like she wanted to have like that security of having someone be like, oh, you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, like you're being a good girl. And it's just like, ugh.
Yeah,
It's a lot.
and like, I mean, he was like basically a father figure in her life, even, with how kind of terrible he was. So I was impressed by how nuanced it was. I think it's one of the reasons why. So I'm like, I know I've recommended a bunch of YA books, but I generally don't really read YA that often. And I think both like the writing style and then also some of the like the mix of like fun, fast paced, and then also nuanced is one of the things that set this apart from other YA, which can sometimes be a little black and white and formulaic. I think this one just like did something a little bit different.
I almost feel like this, like Six of Crows before it in book club terms, it doesn't pull its punches with its readers.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's very willing to fully explore, hey, you know what? Emotions are hard, and sometimes people who are bad people maybe don't seem so much like bad people because you care about them and you want them to be good people.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Oof.
it's
Yeah, definitely.
I'm going to make an observation that I agree with the last three things said in chat by Lost Limey, like hardcore, like the stuff with bad. I was like, no, you cannot do that to the dog. No. And then Jane, yeah, I agree. I was like, man, you could have done so much more with Jane. I kind of feels like she just kind of hitters out there and like is there when convenient and then yes. Name closing all the doors, being named Locke. A little.
Yeah.
Little overt.
Little YA there.
well, not just that, but Adelaide naming her ship the Key. Like, all right.
I see. I feel like that
was an intentional choice. Yeah. By a character who was doing a thing knowingly, but like my name happens to be Locke and I close all the doors.
Yeah. I did like the symbolism of January's name. I did like that. I thought that was fun. And of course, like Julian's name, you know, that was also interesting. But yeah. Locke's name, like, I mean, come on.
So Lost Limey brought up something earlier that I don't know that I got the reveal on because of the little bit of book I had left. Where was Locke and the Society Vampire guy from? Mr. Havmeyer.
And then there was the third.
They were from like different worlds.
Yeah, they were like all three of them. I think were from. Well, maybe
not the same world. I think like three different worlds.
And what was the name of that third guy? The one who had the compass.
Ilvain.
Yeah. I don't remember if he was from another world or if he just had the compass that gave him like that ability to be a creep.
He was like the Batman of the villain crew here. He had like he had the compass. He had the face changing mask. He had the knife skills. He stole the invisibility feather. Like he was just cat and gadgets the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. I hope he's from our world and just was like, all right, I see you, Mr. Vampire. I'm just gonna have a little utility belt of all of the magic items. It's like a high level D&D character, you know. I've got my cloak of whatever and my ring of like frost defense and
oh my god.
Okay, so I found two maps that I'll show you. But like, here is a map of make-believe worlds, and it's got Neverland.
I'm gonna make it big.
It's gonna be like impossible to read all of the places in here, but like there's like it's mostly nursery rhymes, sort of.
Oh, I see the old lady who lived in a shoe. I think I also see the Three Little Pigs houses.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
this
so
is
like
wonderful.
this is the concept, but like I've also seen it for like fantasy worlds. This one is also nursery rhymes. There's Neverland over here, and then like Tom Thumb's house and Old Mother Hubbard and a bunch of other like little places mentioned in stories. This is a lovely book.
Bay.
If anyone ever wants to like check out a book that's beautiful, this has maps of everywhere. Like, is it art that is a map? It's in this book. Like Westeros, we've got Middle Earth, we've got like Asgard, we've got everything. It's all in here. It's all in here.
That's phenomenal.
It's so good. Yeah. But it's fantasy based because it's the writer's map. It's not like actual historical maps. Made up maps. My favorite kind of map. All maps are my favorite kind of maps.
I was going to say, there's a reason why the QPR map looks so good, and it's because you're so excited about things like a book full of fantasy maps.
I used this book full of fantasy maps when I was doing the QPR map.
Love a good fantasy map. Nothing makes me more excited when I crack open a new book and there's a map right there.
Oh my god. When they had the map of the entire, I can't remember the name of it now, but the fortress in Six of Crows that they were doing the heist in.
Mm-hmm.
And they had the whole map, and it's like, whoa, look at this.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Do you love a good fantasy map?
Should do a thread of favorite fantasy map in the Discord.
Yeah, I'm about that. Go find your favorite fantasy map and get it posted up at the book club channel.
Yeah. Try and find one that doesn't look like England. Looking at you, Game of Thrones.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Lost Liney, that's really cool.
I didn't even know that existed.
You have to look that one up later.
Oh.
That's super exciting.
I wonder if that one's in here.
I'm not sure what I keep doing that keeps making my camera mad, but hopefully I stop it. I would like to talk a little bit more about our villains, because we had a hunter, a vampire, and then Mr. Locke, who is of course that most beloved of villains, the villain you don't know is a villain until it's far too late.
Yeah. I mean, you can't, like, he's not a good guy in the beginning, but he doesn't come off as quite, like, vampire level bad.
No.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing, is like the vampire, Mr. Havmeyer and Mr. Ilvain both have this very like predatory air about them, even very early in the story, to the point where I thought that the man that Adelaide met in Ninley was Mr. Havmeyer. I'd thought that's who it was at first, and had not put together until the point where where January is inside Lizzie Larson's house being like, there's something going on here that I'm not quite putting my finger on. And I'm like, oh my god, Locke knew about the blue door when he burned it down. He was aware. He knew. January, you're in danger. Oh no.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. It's hard to say when I knew it because I like read it a while back, but I definitely had a feeling, because like Locke was in cahoots with the other ones, but like definitely is the more I don't know, he was my favorite villain probably. I mean, the vampire, I mean, he was creepy though. He was very creepy. I did dig that, like reaching through the portal, like losing some fingers. That was great. Loved it. I thought the take on vampires was interesting, for sure. But yeah, Locke with his like, you know, the villain you kind of trust or is close to you. Yeah, he was my favorite. Definitely the scariest of the villains. Mr. Capitalism.
The greatest villain of all.
Ah!
I particularly enjoyed foreshadowing Ilvain as a hunter type villain very early in the book. January sneaking up on that meeting and being like, oh, well, this seems slightly out of sorts. And oh, look, there's all these society members that are seated around a table doing an auction. And then Ilvain turns his nose to the air, sniffs something, and starts to turn her way before she like disappears. I'm like, oh, that's gonna be bad news later in the book. I already can feel that. Like, oh no.
Yeah. If like you weren't already suspicious of the like archaeological society, I was like, oh, not only are they bad, but they also have powers.
Once again, on the nose. Like,
Lost Slimy points out that Locke throughout the book is gaslighter and an emotional abuser. And then Marion points out that Locke is a maybe a little close to home for some of our book club aficionados. Yeah, I think the whole thing where she's like, God, he keeps doing this awful stuff to me, but I still care for him. It's like, oh man, having a difficult relationship with your parents. Hi there, how's it going?
Yeah, 100%. I thought their interactions were just so well done. Like when like he tells her that her father is dead and like holds her and comforts her, and then the next day is like, I need you to come to this party, I need you to look good and act good. And I'm like, so it's like, oh. And then like when she doesn't behave exactly how he wants, it's like immediate tone shift for sure.
Yeah, he goes straight from like, oh, come to the west part because we're the smoking room because we're gonna give you your birthday present, and you have to be there at like this specific time because that's when I'm gonna have gathered all my friends together to give you your birthday present. Which I was like, I already hate the vibes of that. And then he's like, you get to be a member of the society. And she's like, what if I don't want that though? And he's like, well, you'd better apologize because this is a big gift I'm giving you. And it's like, Jesus.
Yeah. It was always only about him and like his feelings, and his like kindness to her is about fulfilling like his like, you know, desire to be, you know, to have a pet, like be, you know, it wasn't like, oh, what does January want? It's like, oh, I'm gonna do this, and
more like
of course that's what she would want. Yeah.
It was more like a stewardship than a relationship.
Yeah. I mean, he makes there's all sorts of like comparisons to the collection of unique items. Like he says that all the time about her, and so it's not very subtle, but
that she's perfectly unique.
Yeah.
That's like, ugh.
Likes to collect things that are unique, and it's
Nope, not about it. Not about it. God, and there's so much doubt with her too. Like, maybe he did send me to an insane asylum because that's the best way to protect me, is to lock me up. And, and as she's there, she's noticing that there's all these other women who themselves, she's like, they seem troubled now, but what if they too were just people that got sent here because they were inconvenient? And it's like, oh my God.
Yeah.
It's too real. It's too real.
Yeah, especially like the intersection with gender. When it comes to her experience of the asylum. And then like also like if I don't know, about the treatment of women. I mean, the asylums back then, and like those kind of places were not good for anyone, but woman acting up, not being like compliant, just ship her off. It's like I feel like there's definitely like a gendered component to that, like historically, and then also in the book. Yeah. Ooh. That was honestly as scary as some of the interactions with like the vampire and like some of the other villains.
Yeah, I think I found those parts scarier than the vampires. Yeah. Like seriously, like the being shut up in the institution part, I was just like, and they like took the book away from her, and she's like talking about like trying to be calm and composed and like just hanging on to like little threads of sanity, and then like when it went like was ripped away from her, like she just like snaps and is like, no, like oof.
Gosh, I really enjoyed as you get a little bit further into Julian's writings, and he's talking to some locals in one of the areas, and he's like, they had this name for me, which roughly translated means story eater. Because he's just going to these places like Indiana Jones and just plundering temples and stealing relics and carving away sacred texts and shipping them back to the US. And it's like, yes, story eater sounds about perfect.
Yeah.
And then you find out on top of that the doors are getting shut behind him so that other people can't get access to the same relics he's collecting. And it's like, oh my God.
Yeah, that part definitely surprised me. I don't know. Because like he's portrayed as like not a great father, but like you learn about like his love story and his like passion for like learning and adventure and his like deep love for like Adelaide, and then to like also view him through that perspective was like, well, yeah.
It felt very much like he had two big choices that he made in his life. Like they're like when they're going through on the boat, like his choice to curl up around January instead of like going back to his wife. But then like in the new world that they land in, like he looks for his wife instead of staying with his daughter. And so it's like he chooses both of them at one point, but like it's never like a whole situation. He can't have both, and it's so sad.
Well, he's also so desperate to believe that there's some way that, you know, he can have all this funding and he can have this exploration of this world he's unfamiliar with, and it's, you know, it's all above board. Like he recognizes that stealing from these cultures is wrong, but he feels like it's a necessary evil to accomplish his goals, and then he finds out they're shutting doors behind him, and he's like, well, that's not good. And they're like, well, what are you going to do about it? And he's like, I guess nothing.
Yeah.
Like it makes it pretty clear that Yule Ian on his own is not nearly as like strong spirited as Adelaide or January. But I don't know, like there's something kind of nice in the primary relatable male character being a very flawed individual who like you can appreciate, even though he is essentially a large lummox who's just trying to do his best and falling over his feet on a regular basis.
Yeah, I think he makes a lot of very human, relatable choices that you can be like, oh, yep, well, maybe that's not the best thing to do, but I can see why you did it. And that kind of sucks. But, you know, what would I do? I don't know.
Can't say for sure I would do better. I like to think I would, but can't say for sure.
Yeah. Oh, that's... I don't have super high hopes of me facing adversity and making tough choices and coming out the right way. I don't know. Yeah, that's tough.
Yeah. This book's a thinker for sure.
Yeah.
Did we want to talk about the ending? I know I haven't read it yet, but we usually explore the tail end of these things and kind of the resolution of the story, even if I fail to reach that point.
We can go either way. I feel like we've talked about a lot of it. I don't feel like we need to talk about like the ending.
Yeah, I think that you'll be pleased reading the ending, and like it feels like a appropriate situation, especially like covering all of the various things that we have discussed today. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
I mean, I will post my thoughts in the Discord once I get there. For anyone watching this who's not already there, bit.ly/goblin discord. I'm excited to finish the book. I really don't have that much left. I think it's like 50 pages at most. So I'm like, get me there. But moving takes a lot of time.
Yeah. I was satisfied with the ending. I feel like it wasn't too happy. It was, it was good, but like enough.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There is a sort of like warm, almost melancholy feeling that seeps through pretty much this entire book. Like every time January has something go right for her, she is simultaneously, because she's been wounded so many times by the world, she's like, well, this went right for me, but
Yeah.
Is it gonna keep going right, or was that just like a nice turn of the weather for a change? Like
Mhm.
when Samuel initially is like, we could just be a thing. We could be a thing for basically ever. And she's like, that sounds great, but I'm not so certain I trust myself to be making good decisions right now. Which I'm
Yeah.
like, totally fair, but also like, especially immediately after reading all about her parents and their true love and how like deep and passionate and burning it was for both of them, that they explored whole worlds for like 12 years to find each other. Like, I can't imagine being in that headspace where it's like, I mean, maybe this is real.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially since she was so starved for love and like company, people.
It felt like she was always waiting for Jane to abandon her.
Mhm.
And it was just like, oh, I just want one adult figure in your life to do right by you. Yeah. I think there is kind of a little bit of like a melancholy feel to the book, but in like in a like it, and I think it's about like the writing style sometimes too. Is it's like written very beautifully and like a almost memoir-y, but also like a little bit in that like pretty sad way, you know? But yeah.
Yeah, the front cover says unbearably beautiful.
Unbearably.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that was Amal El Motar that wrote that.
Oh, hey.
I noticed that when you held it up. I had not looked that closely at it on my own copy.
Look at how in the know we are.
Right?
Recognize the author right off of there? Hell yeah.
I was gonna say that's a big compliment coming from Amal El Motar after reading after reading This Is How You Lose the Time War. Like, oh my god.
I think in the back, in one of the like interviews or something, the author of this talks about reading This Is How You Lose the Time War, or mentions it as one of the things that she'd been reading recently. She mentions like books, and I'm like, oh, we know that one. Oh, we know that one. Mm-hmm. Watership Down. Yeah. She said, This Is How You Lose the Time War gave me 100 new ways to say I love you.
Oh
my god, it does. It's so good.
It does. It's so beautiful.
She also talks about Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. Lauren, did you recommend that to me recently?
I haven't read it, but I've heard good things.
I have also heard good things.
Someone told me to read that recently, and I feel like I was talking to you about it, Lauren, and maybe you had said that you hadn't read it, but had talked, I don't know. Anyways, I got that too. I have a whole little stack of books there now. Ugh.
Well, let's take a quick minute and let's talk about the next. Where is it? Nope, that's not what I want. This'll just have to do. Let's talk about our next book, Black Sun, Rebecca Roanhorse.
That's a cool looking book.
So, this is a very cool looking book. So this is one, Lauren, that you had suggested, and you had put up, I believe, 2 Rebecca Roanhorse stories for us to choose from.
Yes. I really enjoy her as an author. I think her writing is super, it's just very engaging. She writes a really good adventure story. She's also written, I think, some Star Wars books that I have not read. But people
That's what I
who
heard.
are fans of the extended universe, I don't think it's called that anymore. Whatever. Maybe check it out.
Whatever.
I think
I didn't
I'm
mean it
not
that way.
certain. I'm not certain, but I think her books are in the current canon, or her book. I have not looked closely as of yet. What I do know is that when I pulled up her Twitter to make sure I was tagging the right person when I did our book club tweet today, I found out that the paperback version of Black Sun is like a brand new release. Like it just came out, I think, today.
Oh, excellent.
Mm.
Nice. Because the hardcover is beautiful, but it's a pretty penny. But yeah, so
It is a very pretty penny. It's such a pretty penny. It's so pretty.
Gorgeous.
her
penny.
I think it's like something lightning, Trail of Lightning is
That sounds right.
like a post-apocalyptic kind of grungy urban fantasy that's really fun that
Ooh.
imagines like this world of Native American myth returned. So you have trickster gods and powers and and stuff like that. And then it's like, I don't know if you can hear the sirens. Yep. DC. And then Black Sun is more of like a traditional fantasy, but inspired by like Central American and South American indigenous culture and myths. So I found it really fun, and it's nominated for a Hugo this year. So other people
Very
also
nice.
think it's good.
I'm excited. I'm ready.
Me too.
And for those of us that ordered our copies from Alpha Comics and Games, conveniently located in Willow Lawn, Richmond, Virginia, those are in today. So go get yours. Go get yours. Lost Limey says her Star Wars book is a canon novel set between The Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker.
Nice.
That's pretty exciting. I wasn't super big on the most recent trilogy, but I have been enjoying basically everything I've experienced in the expanded universe around that trilogy. So I should probably check that book out because odds are good I'll like it.
Yeah, I've never read any Star Wars books.
There are some that are very good.
I've heard it's just like finding the right author, the right like trilogy or whatever within.
There was a chunk of my childhood where that's all that I checked out from the public library was like, where's the Star Wars book section? I'm going to get all of them. I didn't even like get them in order or like get them in ways that made sense. I would get like whatever expanded universe book there was. I was like, I'll get that one. It's got Jedi, maybe.
Yeah. My dad is a big sci-fi and fantasy fan, and he read a lot of Star Trek and Star Wars books. And so they were like everywhere. And I think because I was like a rebellious teen, I was like, I'm not reading that. We'll read something else. So I never read a single Star Wars or Star Trek book, despite the fact that like our bookshelves were full of them.
I mean, there's something to be said for being like, oh, my old man's gonna read all these Star Wars and Star Trek books. I'm gonna be cool and hip and with it and read something else.
Yeah.
All right. I think that's everything we've got for today. Cheryn, what do you want to plug today before we sign off?
Before we plug things, should we maybe talk about book club for August?
Oh, fair point. Fair point.
Yeah.
So, we need to select a book. We had this conversation right before this started, and I am just not brain well. So thank you for reminding me. So book club in August is going to be falling a little bit after Cheryn, Lauren, and myself all go to North Carolina to be at Queen City Anime Con for 3 days. And so at the very least, for the three of us's sanity, it might be easier to do we discussed either a novella or doing a longer book. And the conclusion we came to as a group was that it'd be fun to do a longer book because it's something we haven't done yet. And basically have a plan where it's like, let's get to the halfway mark and we'll discuss everything up to that point in this longer book. And then the following month, we will finish that book and then move into the next one. So I believe, since we are taking turns between just Lauren's suggestions and just audience and all of us suggestions for voting, I believe we are in a Lauren turn for that book selection. But if Lauren, if you want to open that up, I welcome you to. But I always you've yet to suggest a book that I've rated less than 3.5 stars. And I think that's a good indicator. And the only one that got me was 9 Fox Gambit, and that was just we all know what was going on there. It was just too complicated out the gate with no explanation of what was happening. And then of course, by the end of the book, you're like, oh my God, I understand everything. I've seen too much.
Yeah. I'm cool either way. There's definitely, I'm really excited. I think there's some really fun book choices we can do. Maybe digging our teeth into like a 400 or 500 page, sci-fi or fantasy.
I know of a chunky one that I have had on my to-read shelf for a long time that I have not read yet.
Yeah?
Here it is. It's so big.
Oh, Lord. Oh, Lordy.
It's so big. It's too big. This is more like a 3-monther.
Yeah.
Although, granted, the margins are huge. So, like, that's actually not that bad.
How many pages of plot we talking there, Cheryn?
But
it's like 880 pages. How many pages is it?
Okay, well, like this whole chunk here, this is all appendix.
Yeah.
It's a fantasy novel when there's an appendix.
You got an
appendix. About a map. Like
we got maps. We got maps.
Ooh.
We got some dragons. We got all kinds of stuff. Yeah. I've heard very good things about it, but I've been afraid to crack it open.
I have read that one, and it is fantastic. It's this like really, so it's a standalone though. It's not a part of a series, but it's a really hefty book with dragons, and it's fun. I mean, who doesn't love, like, dragons are my favorite in a fantasy book. I love them. They're like my favorite fantasy creature, unless you count vampires. So yeah, it's you have dragons of all kinds. You have like Chinese, like Asian dragons. You have Western dragons. You have good dragons. You have bad dragons. You have different cultures with different approaches to dragons. You have a cute, like not a cute, a good like love story. Yeah, it's great.
Lost Army was just like, if you want insanely chunky sci-fi, might I suggest The Reality Dysfunction, because it was originally published as 2 novels because it's part of a 1.2 million word trilogy.
It turns.
All right. Tentatively, I'll think about it and I'll think about it and write up some suggestions. But A Memory Called Empire is my favorite book of last year. Of all of the books I read last year, this one was my favorite. It's a sci-fi. All like if you like your sci-fi with court politics and intrigue, this is the book for you. It's got some interesting like what makes a person, people's relationship with technology. It has lots of commentary on like imperialism. It's got some fun, like kind of almost murder mystery vibes. It's good. Basically, the new ambassador from this tiny little space station is being sent to this empire, right? And she's being sent there because the previous ambassador was murdered. And so she has to go to the planet city of this empire, like the head, the capital. That's the word I'm looking for. She's go to the capital, to the court, and figure out what the previous ambassador was doing, why he was murdered, and also try and convince the emperor not to annex her tiny space station republic. So very politics heavy, but like really good.
Oh,
What's on that
interesting.
cover? Hold that cover up. Hold that cover up.
It's the Emperor's throne, the Sun Spear throne, and you know, the ambassador.
That's
Love
very
throne.
cool.
Love a throne.
Yeah.
Gotta love a good throne. I do like the idea of a sci-fi court intrigue, murder mystery, international politics.
Yeah.
Like you're mashing a lot of stuff together that just sounds like it's gonna be very, very deep with things for book club to discuss, which I am about. I am about.
They have like coded poetry is how like they communicate. Yeah, that's cool. The second book came out not too long ago, and it's called the title is A Desolation Called Peace.
Oh yeah.
It's not a good name for a book. Anyway.
That is a very good name for a book.
I'll stop nerding out about my favorite book. I got everyone in my book in my D&D session to read it. We have like a little impromptu like book club almost, because while we wait for everyone to join, we just talk about stuff, books.
Oh my god, that's magnificent. So I'm hearing a slight leaning towards everybody throw a book in there.
Sure.
Okay. I am going to suggest part one of a trilogy that I haven't read in a very long time, but was very formative for me growing up, and I have no idea how it holds up, as I sometimes do. The trilogy is called The Belgariad, and it is a David Eddings and his wife fantasy novel series that's very, very powerful YA vibes, but also something that was like, that I think was the book that I read that got me really into fantasy as a genre. Because I think it explored the space in a way that I'd never really thought to.
Mm.
And so...
I don't know that I've heard of that one. Do you know the
Really?
Do you know the title of the first book?
So there's two ways to read it. There's the paperbacks, which I think are collected into like 6 books, and then there's the hardcovers, which are collected into 3. And if we're gonna do a 2-book reading, I would probably lean us towards those hardcovers. The first book is called Pawn of Prophecy, And I think the hardcover, I think it might just be called The Belgariad Part 1. I'm pulling it up now. Yeah, the first book is Pawn of Prophecy. Is it 5 parts in the... Oh my gosh. Got it. It's been reprinted as a 2-volume set titled The Belgariad Volume 1, which contains the first 3 books of the series, and then The Belgariad Volume 2, which contains the final 2. So it is a 5-book series all told. But I think if we were doing a 2-month deal, I think we could probably get through the first one.
The first one.
So that's going to be what I put up for my voting block. Lauren, it sounds like you've got your Empire intrigue very much about. And then Cheryn, you're putting up the Priory of the Orange Tree. Excellent.
I might think on it and suggest another. I'll just have to look through my bookshelves and give it a little bit of thought.
I'm happy to accept an additional entry. All right. Now, having discussed all of that, Cheryn, what do you want to plug?
I don't know. Normal life happening. Book club's still going on. Book club's great. Come to book club. It's good. I don't know. I've got nothing. I got nothing. We got QCAC coming up. So like lots of fun and exciting projects for that. Cool t-shirts coming out. Cool new books. So I'm excited to see these things become manifested physically soon. So anybody who's excited about new physical things you can hold in your hands, there's more of that to come soon. Woo.
I don't know if everybody just had a bad time because I'm the host, or if I exclusively had a bad time. I'm hoping it was me exclusively because I just had a bad time.
I don't know.
I think you might have frozen, maybe.
No, I definitely froze, but I don't know what the audience sees. I don't know if StreamYards works differently than OBS used to, where it was like everything funnels through your computer, so if your connection goes down, it ruins everything. Hopefully that's not it. Lauren, what would you like to plug?
I guess I will plug the same thing as always, which is if you want to see what I'm reading, you can follow me on Instagram at Feminist Reading List, where I post about both my life and also all of the sci-fi, fantasy, and romance and manga that I'm reading currently. It's kind of an eclectic mix, totally dependent on my whim, and I'm having a good time. And I think I'll also be joining the Goblins at Queen City Anime Con. Very excited about that. And I'm going to have to think up some cosplays. I want to do at least one. Probably just one. But give it some thought. That's it.
Hell yeah. We are super excited to have you along for QCAC. I think it's going to be a ton of fun. And of course, anybody who is watching this right now who would like to come join us, I believe it's the 20th to the 22nd this year of August. So there's a little bit of time left to get a ticket and get down there. North Carolina, in the Queen City of Raleigh.
Charlotte.
Good Lord. It's like big cities in North Carolina. There are like 2 that I know. 2. You are correct though. Charlotte is where we're going.
The slightly less convenient one.
Still very good though. Lots of good things happening in Charlotte.
Oh yes.
So yes, come visit. Come have anime con fun times with us. I am going to plug the Patreon, where if you appreciate the many projects the Goblins and Growlers is a part of, including our podcast Quid Pro Roll, the actual play podcast in a world of Alex Smith's pure design, then you should support us, because supporting us is the best way to make sure that we can not only continue the projects that you enjoy, but that we can do new projects that you can also then enjoy. Our Patreon is patreon.com/goblinsgrowlers, and we have lots of cool rewards for people who pledge support to us. Cheryn is involved in a lot of those rewards. I am involved in a lot of those rewards. Lauren is going to be involved in some of those rewards here in the immediate future, as she is working on a 1-page dungeon for us that I'm really excited about, because I got to write a monster for it and it sounds really cool. The 1-page dungeon does. So, check that out. If you like seeing the stuff that we're doing and you're not already supporting us, please look into potentially supporting us. If you're already supporting us, thank you so much for doing so. We really appreciate it. Every little bit counts. Every little bit helps. If you're not supporting us and you're like, hey man, I don't have that kind of scratch in pocket, then that's okay. Maybe consider sharing our stuff out. Whether it's things like book club, or if it's things like the Patreon itself, to your friends, to be like, hey, look at all this cool stuff these people are doing. Everything can assist us in becoming a little bit bigger and having a little bit more that we can then do. I think that's everything I've got. Unless there's any closing thoughts anyone has, as my video goes out again.
Slowly melting away into the darkness. So.
But unless there's any closing thoughts anyone has, I think this is a good point to call it a night. Thank you all so much for everyone who tuned in. And we will see you next month. Oh my gosh, that's something. I put it on our calendar. We will see you next month on the 27th. 27th of July. Oh my gosh. All right. Thank you all so much for tuning in. I will catch you in a month. Bye.